Welcome to another episode of Inspire People, Impact Lives. Today's topic is making an impact by spreading your message with marketing. Marketing is one of the most important things a business can do. Not only does marketing build brand awareness, but it also can generate sales, grow businesses, and engage customers. The core of any business is to solve problems. Oftentimes, the bigger the problem you can solve, the better. However, if you really want to make an impact in your industry, market, community, or neighborhood, people need to know what problem you can solve. You could have a cure for cancer, but if no one knows about it, you're not going to change anyone's life. In order to grow your business and make an impact on people's lives, you need marketing. Here today to give us some marketing tips and explain how she personally is making an impact with our community is Rowan Childs. Rowan is a veteran marketing specialist and founder of her nonprofit, Madison Reading Project. She has spearheaded marketing campaigns in industries ranging from medical devices to property management and architectural planning. She most recently was on the board of directors for the Social Media Breakfast Madison chapter, and as I mentioned, founded the Madison Reading Project. The Madison Reading Project started in 2014 with the goal of helping vulnerable kids with their reading. Her nonprofit has grown from helping 30 kids with reading to a larger reach of thousands of children across South Central Wisconsin by providing quality reading materials and inspiring programming, which is just awesome. So Rowan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm looking forward to digging in and talking about the nonprofit because I firmly believe in the health and education of our youth. I'm also very excited to talk about the marketing with you today, as many of our audience members are business executives and entrepreneurs. And I think one of the biggest things that they have is so everyone has this marketing budget, but I think the problem they come with is where do they spend it? Where do they put it? What's going to be most effective, get most bang for the buck? Because I know that I've asked those questions myself. So really excited. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with some background. Why did you choose marketing as a career?
Well, initially I never actually knew exactly what marketing was. I kind of stumbled into it and then realized along the way that what I was doing is actually marketing. I was marketing myself as a designer at the time and the firm that I worked until the point that people came up to me and said, you're really good at talking about yourself and your company. Maybe you should do that as a career. And that's when I kind of turned around and looked at everything that I had done and looked up the definition of marketing and said, oh,
yeah,
hey, I really enjoyed doing this. I could do this for a living. So I took about 2 years of working my way back up and learning a lot of things and jumped in.
So that's great, because you told me your degree wasn't marketing, right?
Yeah, I have an art and English degree.
So you can articulate.
I can.
So that leads into marketing, but not getting a marketing degree, because I know that, when I was at Whitewater, a lot of people were in marketing. Madison, I know there's marketing. There's marketing in almost every university, and marketing means so much to so many people, but even someone that doesn't have the back or degree can be very successful in it as well. So can you recall any marketing or ad campaign that really inspired you at a young age? Like, was there anything that stuck out that it's like that just kind of drew you to that field?
Well, definitely, I think when I look back at some of the things that really stuck out to me, early on, one of those brands specifically was National Geographic.
Interesting.
Which is something that probably you weren't thinking I was going to throw out.
No, that wouldn't have been one of them, I would guess.
I traveled a lot as a child growing up. And one of the things that we always had, though, was that National Geographic magazine sent to our house. And those are things that inside that magazine, there's all kinds of images, stories. But that brand in particular is something, as a little kid, you kind of recognize it. It's yellow, it's got the logo. Mm-hmm. And that's something iconic. As a kid, even now, I see it and I instantly think of, the magazine and what it meant to me growing up. And that's still something that's still around today in various forms.
That's fascinating. Actually, as you told your story there, I'm thinking of my grandparents' house, and that magazine was always there. Yeah. And my parents never got it, but when we went to visit my grandparents, it was something that I would flip through, and you're right. I can still picture the bold white lettering with the yellow trim and whatever graphic picture was their highlight for that month or whatever it might be. So that's fascinating. Was there any effects that campaign or that magazine had on you in particular?
In particular, probably just sort of knowing about the world. Sort of grew up without the internet, so I'm dating myself. But that was definitely like that whole eye into the whole other world, other cultures, learning about other countries or just different industries. So that was something for me was definitely like, this is probably more educational to me than reading the encyclopedia at the time or something else like that. So that definitely stuck with me. And eventually I think I got rid of some of the stacks of my own National Geographics.
So I'm thinking now, we went back to childhood.
Yeah.
And now you have the internet. And now you have all this stuff. What marketing campaigns are you attracted to today? Is there anything that sticks out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of them, I can name it. Now, of course, I'm like, which one is there in particular? I mean, I think some of them are really clever. And I actually, in particular, like some of the ones that aren't actually geared towards women because, there's lots of ads geared towards women these days in a variety of shapes and fashions. Some that do a really good job and others that you cringe at and wonder, why didn't anyone stop them with this, right? You're just like, oh, no, that's not going to fly. But some of the ones I find intriguing are not the ones that are geared towards me. So in particular, maybe geared towards men or people, geared towards kids or not my age group. So some of the local, whether it's Budweiser campaign or some of those that I find really entertaining, but they're really not for me.
Yeah.
I think, whether it's also like Doritos or like things like, what's the word I'm thinking of? Beef jerky. That's something that is not, that's not geared towards me whatsoever, but I find it very amusing.
Sasquatch. Very amusing. That's right.
Yeah.
So that's interesting you say that and how opposites attract. I think I've noticed more of the female ads. I'm like, you're right. There's some of them like, oh man, that's really good. Because women can be better. I think the consumer stats out there, I mean, they're targeting for a reason. And I'm like, oh, that's really good. And you're right. There's been a couple. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to go over. Not being female myself, I'm not in a position to judge. But I'm like, definitely had those cringeworthy thoughts as well. Mm-hmm. So in your own words, can you tell us why marketing is important? Maybe not just for businesses, but just individuals. Going back to your New York story and marketing yourself along with the business you were working for.
Yeah, I mean, I think marketing, whether you are an individual, if you've got your own company, a nonprofit, or it's a particular cause or something like that you're helping with, is really letting other people understand what you're all about and why. It doesn't matter if you're one person and you have $10 to put towards your effort, or if you have $1 million. It's really letting people know sort of that whole reasoning behind it and whether they should get behind you as far as if it's a cause, if they should buy your product, if that you want them to repeat your story to somebody else. And I think it can be, really make an impact on someone, whether, you're sharing something personal about it. And that's what's going to carry your name or your brand, from one person to the other person without you even having to say something. And that's sort of definitely how that can sort of trickle down in multiple ways or fashions. So like you mentioned earlier on, you could have an amazing idea or a story, but if no one else knows about it, it'll be lost forever.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you were really good at talking about yourself. I'm one of those people that's actually not. Believe it or not, I have a podcast, but so that's kind of ironic, right? But I actually hate talking about myself, and I actually cringe when people give me compliments. So I'm like one of those people. So if there's any people like me that don't like talking about themselves, which again is marketing if you're in business, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, then I would say start with something you are comfortable with. Although I'm always also a proponent of putting yourself out there, maybe baby steps.
Yeah.
But I would start with something you're comfortable with. So if you don't want to go and talk about yourself on a podcast or stand up in front of other people, what can you do then? Is it social media? Can you write a blog where you don't have to get up and put yourself out there? Is it pictures that you can take even with your cell phone and just start to build yourself up that way, for instance, so that if you don't like public speaking, you could do something else. But there's a variety of ways, I think, to do that. And then, like I mentioned as well, I sort of had to get over my own hurdle of starting a variety of different things, whether it was starting in marketing and not knowing everything, but you just at some point just have to jump in and then figure it out. The same with people who don't like public speaking. the only way to get better at it is to practice it.
So what's the correlation between belief in yourself or belief in the product that you're marketing that does that go hand in hand?
Well, hopefully you do believe what you're marketing.
Yeah.
But I would say, are you asking sort of how do you go?
Let's say someone, that maybe someone's uncomfortable because they don't have 100% confidence in yet what they're doing or what they're pitching or whatever it may be. Were there any times like that for you, or any advice for those people that may not?
Yeah. I mean, I think if anything too, depending on what you're pitching, is letting people know like, hey, I've got this idea. It's not a real thing yet, but I think it's a really good idea. Do you want to join me? Or, for example, or, letting people know, like, if it's a product that's not fully, completely innovated, or it's not, rolled out, ready to go.
It's not baked yet. It's a rough draft.
It's still a rough draft, but then let people know that, it's sort of like your pilot program for something else. Some people actually do kind of like that. It's sort of like, oh, I can get in on the beginning. It's an idea. I like people with ideas, versus coming back with the full finished product, and everything's completed. So I think being honest with people, if it is something that you have that isn't fully fleshed out, then have that conversation.
Yeah, and you get some real feedback that way too. Yeah, that's really good. So for a business owner looking to hire a marketing person or potentially even an agency, what are some important things that you would look for?
I would definitely say look at some of their work. So if they have a website, check out what they've done. Look at, even if it's not the same industry, just look at a variety of skills that they might have or their agency might have. Look at the companies that they've worked with, that they have either from that specific industry or from prior work too, and see if there's something that really speaks to you, or if there's something clever that they did that you think, that's really cool. Not necessarily that they could do that exact idea with what you want, but just sort of looking at that experience level. And then I would always say referrals too.
No, that's good. Yep.
Find out if they did work with a variety of different people, get their feedback.
Do you think they have to be or have had experience in the industry or sector that they're doing work for?
Not necessarily. I mean, depends again on what product you've got. I did for a while some medical device in a startup company, which I hadn't had any experience with that. But in some ways, it's a little refreshing because you get a new perspective on things. So fresh look at sort of what's going on in that industry. And in the startup industry, too, it's a little bit different where you've got a lot of different people who are understanding and kind of thinking about things differently as it is, versus something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah. And I guess the old adage there would be, sometimes people that know it too closely or too close to the forest to see the trees. So being able to take that step back and, like you said, get that fresh perspective could be helpful, depending on what we're pitching. So for a business owner looking to try some marketing of their own, let's say it's a startup, or even a moderate length in business, where do they start?
I would say, you can definitely Google startup marketing plan, right? And it'll say, do these 5 things. And then, something that I would do is sort of write it down, try and figure it out, sort of what exactly is my product? What am I trying to sell or pitch to people? Why do I want them to care? And sort of how are you laying that out? Most people are going to say you're going to need a website, depending on what it is. Do you need social media? But look at who you're really trying to target, because depending on who you're actually trying to reach, they might not be on social media. A website's probably just really helpful to have to place all your information. But you really need to sort of think about where your demographic is, and that's maybe where you need to be versus, oh, I need social media, and it's for someone that isn't using it. Yeah. So does social media play a role for everyone these days? Pretty much.
Yeah. I have my bias, but I wanted to hear it from you as well.
Not everyone's on social media. Maybe it's some form or format. It's actually pretty interesting to me at this point, what the range of age is on social media, and it's not necessarily every single channel, but it is interesting, and there's just millions of people joining the ranks at this end.
I mean, I think about it when you go out of town. So I was in, and I know Milwaukee fairly well, was being that we're so close, but even just being there last weekend, my favorite restaurant, no, it was a couple weekends ago. Anyhow, my favorite restaurant was, I know they're closed Sunday, Monday, and I wanted to take a group out Sunday. So I'm Googling, what restaurant we should take them to. So I'm looking at reviews and looking at different things and looking at different social media posts about these restaurants. Because that's a nice Facebook function now, is that you can actually search in your group of friends who have been in that city and see where they went to, and if there was like a consensus of spot, like this was the hot spot, so that's either entertainment, food, or otherwise, and see, okay, well, I know this group of people, I like this group of people, I trust this group of people's opinion, and they've been to this place, so okay, we'll give it a try. Or the reviews that may be out there. So I think you're right, like online, social media, I think no matter what age you're at, it plays a role. And if you're at too old of an age to get into that, I think that better hire someone that can do it.
Well, I mean, my own father, who's in his 70s, we were talking, he lives out of state. We were trying to figure out a place to meet and where to go. And he's like, I'll just look on Yelp. And that really was interesting to me that he even knew what it was. He doesn't have it on his phone, but he looks it up via the website, and just to get some reviews on restaurants, places, things to do.
Yeah.
So you
that
just
is
never
interesting.
know.
Even he's looking at that. I actually, so my grandfather just turned 90, and I was joking with my dad a couple years back that my grandfather knows the internet better than my dad does, just because he's actually taken the time and not just said, So it's kind of funny in that respect. But so do you think we've hit enough on the importance of putting together and understanding a brand or vision or message, or should we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love branding. I mean, I can talk about marketing and branding all day long, but
we both got kids to get to, so
yeah,
we'll make sure we hit on it enough that it gets the point across. But so how important is it to put together a clear brand vision message?
I mean, that's something, from the very beginning, setting, when I think writing that plan out, writing out your brand, and then trying to make sure you stick to it. So if you write it out in January, that you check in maybe once every month, especially at the beginning, and look back and say, am I kind of staying within my brand? Or am I just going off on this tangent? Whether it's I'm putting my logo on all kinds of crazy things, or is it all the way down to the font and the colors? Are you adding all these random things in that doesn't make sense to people, especially at the beginning when they're just getting to know you or your company? So really looking at trying to be strategic about what you're putting out there with your company name on.
Especially if it's your name.
That too.
That's a whole different ball, because we have,
right.
I know that, throughout the Madison area, there's so many business owners that I've interacted with, whether they're in building homes, building commercial buildings, whether they're marketing or CPA firms or anything, like their names are on it. So it's it's, I don't know, I think doubly, triply important if your personal name is on your business name, that you're really minding your P's and Q's on what's going out. And
it'll come, it could be something that you might have put out 3 years ago, but people can still find it, even if you delete stuff off your website or social media, it'll somehow can resurface itself.
The internet doesn't forget, it seems.
Yeah. So that's something I would definitely say, is just revisiting your branding message, especially with, how you're talking about things, even just the tone of your language. Is it friendly? Is it sassy? Is it straightforward? But just staying continuous throughout that, and then checking through, and maybe by the end of the year, you decide to make some adjustments.
So I'm a big person with authenticity and being true to who you are. Do you think that should speak through the company brand? Or how would you separate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think consumers are pretty smart, especially in this day and age where there's just so much coming at them. And if you're not authentic, or they believe you and then they see something else that isn't what you said you were, then I think they're done. Or it's hard to come back from that. So being authentic and talking about yourself, you need to be careful about what you're saying about yourself, but being yourself and being authentic, I think, is even more important.
What made me think of that is you use the word sassy, and I'm like, well, if that's someone's authentic self and that's what they want to come across, then absolutely be sassy, right? Because that's who you're trying to attract, is other sassy people, I guess, right?
I don't know. But if that's your thing, then I would be, if that's who you are, or you like to make jokes or whichever,
then people know they got you when they get you. Yeah. So have you watched or read any of Simon Sinek's stuff in the Start With Why? Mm-hmm. Does that speak to you when you go through marketing?
Yeah, I think it's got a really good message in it. I mean, there's lots of messages that I think he has gotten from speaking to a variety of people, and I think he's also been able to take his own brand and been able to turn that around and really educate the masses, I guess, at this point. I also think it's a good sort of entry-level book for anybody, though, to read, mm-hmm. whether you're in marketing or not.
I'd agree. It's a great business book.
It's simple, but it makes sense.
I've had the opportunity to hear him speak a couple times, and I don't know that he goes too off of what his book does. Like, he's given great oral presentations, and you can see his stuff on YouTube and TED Talks. But I think it was really tremendous, and he utilizes Apple as one of those examples, and that's an iconic brand that even my kids dance to the commercials because they got a catchy song that's on them now. But it's good stuff. So Simon Sinek, Start With Why is the book. But if you're not going to read, check out his YouTube and TED Talk stuff on marketing. Is a good resource. So let's talk a little bit about the board that you're on, or were on most recently, the Social Media Breakfast Madison Club. Tell us more a little bit about that organization.
Yeah, so that organization is actually, I think, over 15 or 20 years old at this point. And it was really initially all put together from people who wanted to learn more about social media. And they set up a monthly meeting in the basement of a restaurant on the east side. And they met once a month and they had coffee and talked about social media and kind of like shared information. It was still new at the time. Yeah. How do you do this? How do you do that? And it grew from being in the basement all the way to what it is today, which at this point they usually have at least one meeting per month, if not more. And they'll have anyone, that range of people attending anywhere, depending on the venue, from 100 to 300 people.
Wow.
Attend. So it's grown tremendously from the beginnings.
And anyone can attend?
Anyone can attend. It's a free event.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where would people find out about that?
If they look them up online. Online, Social Media Breakfast Madison. There are other groups now throughout the U.S. But specifically for Madison, they always have a monthly event with a really good speaker or speakers. So there's either an individual speaker or a panel. There's always time for questions afterwards, sort of how to or best recommendations. And then it's great networking. So you've got a whole variety of people who attend, whether they're in marketing or they're in a business that they don't have a marketing person, or you just want to go and learn a little bit more. And it's all different industries, and that's what I really enjoy, because you can meet someone from somewhere completely different.
Yeah, that's cool. I think a lot of times the organic networking that happens at some of those events is some of the most useful stuff that may come out of it.
Yeah, I've met a huge range of people, and I love that you might have someone who just got out of college, someone who's, they could be in agriculture, someone else could be in marketing at an insurance company. I mean, there's just a huge range of people there, and it's a free event, and they always have coffee. So.
Yeah. Free coffee, free pizza, we talked about before. Yeah, just whatever, free food or free coffee, free beer, something of that nature. You'll get people
good
to show
education. I think that's the other thing.
Yeah, if the content wasn't great, you wouldn't get 100 or 300 people to come.
Exactly.
So, no, that's really good. So last thing on social media, since we're still on that path there, are there any tips for someone just starting out that whether they get on, there's so many platforms now, from Instagram, Facebook, all this different stuff. Any tips or which ones they should go towards? Or
I mean, depending if they're using it for marketing, I would really, again, look at who they're trying to talk to, and really just maybe take a couple of days and just look at, is that group of people on that platform before you go off using Snapchat and you don't know how to use it. Or if you're on Twitter or Instagram, is depending on what your message is or your product, I would kind of look at who else is out there that maybe has something similar. Are they doing a good job? Are they getting the response.
Yeah, how do they drive followers?
Exactly.
All that stuff, yeah.
Before you spend, money and time and effort trying to get good at one platform. And I would definitely pick one or two, not do all of them, because it would be a lot of work.
Unless you hired someone full-time to do that. But
right.
Yeah,
and even then.
That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. So do you have any other resources to share for the audience on marketing before we get into some of the Madison Reading Project stuff? Well, if you think of any, we'll jump back in.
So many.
Right.
Without trying to overwhelm people.
So, there is a ton of great stuff there for business owners, and hopefully that makes an impact in their markets. It's so broad, the marketing thing. So we talked about social media. There's print stuff, there's signage elsewhere. That's what I talk about. Like I get hit up by, UW to put signage up at the Cole Center or the Camp Randall or run these events, whatever. Then you get hit up by the newspapers or the magazines in town or all this different stuff, and is what's going to be most applicable to get your brand out. Because for me, I don't believe Northwestern Mutual is going to get any more brand awareness from me putting a sign at the Cole Center, especially since they're a national advertiser for the NCAA. So that's never, and not to say anyone else wouldn't get that, because I don't want to, some people obviously are getting traction there. So you just got to look at your industry, and then my industry as well for financial services. There's so many restrictions that we can't do that, so I could never be on Snapchat and run that. But some others may find some great humorous stuff and find some great millennial followers to be able to drive their brand with Snapchat. So there's just figure out what's going to work best for that industry, I think would be my side of the advice. And you're the expert, but that's just my experience, because I've been hit up many a times, and I'm just trying to weigh out, and where I've really found the median place where it really works well for me in my giving is giving to stuff like charitable stuff and matching marketing with that.
Yeah,
do you have any experience with that?
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge? Yeah. All right. So let's talk about that. Let's get into Madison Reading Project. How did you come to founding this nonprofit?
So it was an idea that I had for a long time, or I guess just a feeling of, it was something I always, had this excitement or passion for reading and books, and what my parents had instilled in me about what it meant to be able to read and learn about others through your books. And as I ended up having my own kids, and that was something I just kept thinking about, is I'm able to provide them with some new books or take them to the library or encourage them to read. And what about the kids who don't have those opportunities? And knowing even my son, who really didn't want to read, what tools were available to him, usually through myself, or if he was at daycare, and what they were helping him with. And I thought, there's so many other kids out there that don't have these opportunities, that aren't able to get to the library or don't have books at home or bookcases of books, and what happens to them. And then if you really think about, if you're not able to read, and the whole statistic, if you can't read by third grade, the rest of your school career is pretty much really difficult, or do you graduate? So it's just something I kept thinking about, and it really bothered me, to the point that I guess I finally just said, I got to do something. And then I spent about 6 months just talking to a variety of different people, asking for referrals of who I could speak to next, just telling people kind of what I was thinking about doing, and eventually landed with someone who was running the Salvation Army Darbo Drive Center. And he was looking for a way to help the kids in the after-school program. And the kids in the after-school program, he said usually about 40% may be homeless at one point. They live in an impoverished area with not a lot of opportunity. And I thought, well, that's just, the two of us were talking for a while, trying to figure out what we could do. And he finally just said, Rowan, you're starting your program in 2 months. We'll figure it out.
So you had a deadline.
So he kind of gave me a deadline. Good. And also because he said, I just need to help kids. I need to help these kids get excited about reading, first and foremost. So it started with an idea, a conversation, and then really the opportunity to do a pilot program for 4 months of that semester. And from there, it quickly grew from an idea to kids getting really excited about it. The kids loved that we were able to provide them with new books and replace most of the books in their library, and reading rewards and literacy parties, and maybe shockingly to me, but maybe not to the kids and the programming staff there. They're like, you've got to come back this summer. And what about the fall? I'm like, wait, what? So it just sort of, grew pretty quickly from that idea. And I think people were excited to help out and participate because they could see that there was a need there, and it was also something different and exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So prior to the show, you said that your son was really into athletics, and that was, so that was his driving force, but didn't want to read. So I really identified with that because I remember. Oh, and we talked about the Book It program.
Yeah.
So for the, is that still around?
Yeah, it's still around. Not every school still carries it, but yeah, they still do it.
That was such a driver for me as a child, but then as I got more involved with sports, so I would say up until like 5th grade, I was all about it, reading fiction, reading as many books as I can, and then sports, and then puberty happens, and you're interested in other stuff, and it's like, oh my gosh, so I have no interest in reading anymore. And the English teacher assigns you Tale of Two Cities or some really long, boring book like that. and To Kill a Mockingbird, or something ridiculous, which is, these historic books, but like freshman, sophomore in high school, not going to trip the trigger of most people. So that's where I was at. But now I read incessantly. I read all the time. Most of it's self-development, leadership, marketing, like we talked about with Simon Sinek. So I'm all nonfiction. And I've been suggested that I should get into some fiction as well. But right now I'm just in this growth spurt of just wanting to soak in as much to be a better leader and person as I possibly can. Family stuff I read, but all nonfiction right now. So maybe I'll get back to that fiction desire again, get into the next big Harry Potter thing or whatever it may be. But right now it's not. But I found it really curious, your son being in athletics. And so what worked for him?
So he really didn't want to read the books the teachers assigned to him, basically, because he thought they were boring. So I came up, which, I get it.
Yeah.
So I'd come up with, whether it was he was into sports, so maybe, get a magazine subscription. So we, every week there was a fresh magazine, even though it wasn't at his reading level at the time, he would still sit and read that, look at the pictures, he'd read the statistics, even going to their website, and he would read all of that because he wanted to know the scores or about the team. So he would read all of that instead. So that was something, just coming up with different ways. Or he was really into sushi and food for a while, which is fine. So he would read recipe books, and I'd have him tell me how to make stuff. And he would recite the whole recipe out of the book because that's what he wanted for dinner. So there was all these other ways, to get kids into reading. It's just, but not saying you have to sit down and you have to read, or you have to read this many pages. So there's all these other ways and cues that you can get kids to read stuff to you, but without necessarily, it doesn't always have to be a book.
You'd make the meal?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because I really wanted him to read.
Well, yeah. So, but that's such a outside of the box way of doing something. That's so. You have such a bonding experience there with your son. Like you're getting him to do something in an indirect way that you want him to do anyhow, and you're cooking a great dinner, and you got that
whole
time.
Meal out of it.
Yeah. So I'm sure your daughter and husband love that.
They're like, great.
Yeah,
great.
Name. You guys keep doing that.
Keep going. But that is something, and again, no matter what your budget is, whether it is cooking or taking your kids at the grocery store, asking them all those questions like, which cereal do you see? Or, and some of it, they might not know quite how to read it. It might be a name recognition, but getting them to repeat things like that, or what's that sign on the bus or a billboard. It's all those little cues sometimes too that can really help kids kind of realize that they actually probably can read.
Yeah.
But it's not, it could be sometimes just that setting or that particular book that turns them off. And
yeah. No. So what age was that? Did that start for you?
That was he was around 6 at the time.
Okay. Yeah. So my oldest is 7, just turned 7. And so she's going through all that reading stuff now. And what's interesting though is the 5-year-old is picking up on the stuff as we're going through it.
Right.
And it's pretty cool to see that, as like she'll be much more advanced just based on hearing her sister and going through words and doing spelling tests and starting to read the simple books. And she's doing it out loud. And now that I think about it, the 3-year-old who can't read at all, like they're not picking up at all, but she's pretending to read the books and going through it like we would with the finger and all this different stuff.
That's great stuff.
It's and then she's making up the story as she goes, which is showing the creativity.
So she'll be a great reader.
Hopefully. She's the most stubborn one too, so we'll see. We'll see if she ends up going that path.
She's putting on a good act already, though.
She's putting on a great act. Yes.
She's already displaying all those literacy cues, though. Which
yep,
is good.
That's true. So, tell us more about how it went from 30, or I guess your son to 30 to now thousands.
Yeah. So we were at Salvation Army, and we specifically stayed at Salvation Army for about a year and a half exclusively, really just figuring out what worked, what didn't work. We went through sort of an evolution of mostly myself being there that at first time, so I'd be there maybe a couple times per month, and then really working with the staff who were there to kind of go through the other items that we had suggested. And they were a good part of that as well, sort of figuring out what worked in the classroom after school and what didn't. And so it really started from that, which was myself. And then during the summer and then the fall, lots of people wanted to join in and volunteer. So that next phase was we matched every child with a volunteer. And that was really exciting, but it was also, I was working full time and had my own kids, and how do you manage all of that? And now you have 30 volunteers to coordinate on top of it. And also at that point, about a year in, people are starting to request that we come and do something at their community center. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
And it kind of got to the point where I was like, this isn't really, this isn't feasible with one person. And I had a volunteer who wanted to become an employee, and we, at that point, had also made ourselves into a nonprofit, so that we were able to accept donations. And at that point, we really sort of took a look at how do we make this all happen, and how do you help thousands of kids and not just 30 kids, and how do you scale it? And so what we also did, sort of at the same time as we're trying to figure this out, is people kept stopping by my house and dropping off books. We were like, hey, I heard you're doing something really great with books and kids. I have this box of really nice books that my kids had. I've saved them up. I want you to give them to someone who really needs them.
It's great. They get this box out of their basement or whatever, put it on.
And sometimes they were great books and sometimes not so great. Yeah. And so I'd often every time I go over, I'd bring a box of books. So the kids thought it was great. We redid a lot of the books at Salvation Army. We kind of got to the point where my husband said, you kind of got a hoarding problem here. We've got 50 boxes of books in the basement. And every time, like every week, someone else would just drop them off unsolicited. Or I'd get home and there'd be a box on the doorstep. And I'm sort of like, okay, so people have books that could be good quality children's books. And we have kids who need books. What can you do? And then that point, too, is sort of at this tipping point of what do we do with everyone else. And that's when we decided to sort of make it a two-prong approach, which was we'll be able to do programming, not just exclusively to one place, but at the same time, we'll be able to give out books. And so it was an idea. We didn't really know how many books we could truly give away and how many books people would give to us. So the first year we said, we'll give out 1,000 books. That seems like a lot of books. We'll kind of go through them, make sure they're decent quality. We'll put all the adult ones that we don't want to the side. And I thought, we'll just need a bookshelf. That'll be good. So it ended up being 5,000 books by the end of that year. And probably...
Was it a big bookshelf?
Yeah.
Not big enough,
kind of outgrew very quickly in about 2 months. So it went from just this very small sort of idea to thousands of books went out. And also thousands of books were being given to us because apparently when you tell people you take their books, there's just like this inundation of like, here's all this stuff. So we've come a long way from that, which is sort of all these sort of guidelines on how to give books and what kind of books, and please don't drop off your adult books. So we've gone from whole thing, which is kind of a learning experience.
That's funny that you have to say and like list those things to people.
Yes, you do have to list those things, unfortunately. But we've come a long way. So now, at this point, we have our own donation center. And we've given out probably to date around 70,000 books.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty crazy sort of in that short period of time. And we hand sort all of the books that come in. So they're new, lightly used. We do purchase some books at this point that are the high need books that aren't usually donated. For example, like diverse books, Spanish books, bilingual books. But it's really been with staff and volunteers, our organization has grown from that one partner to about 60. And then next year we will be, sort of at the 100,000 mark.
That's awesome.
So in a short...
that's really something to applaud. You got to be really proud of that work.
It's not, I can't do it by myself.
No, but it was your initiative that got it started. I mean, that's really incredible. Thank you for all the work.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's something, it's a lot of numbers, and it's a lot of thousands of kids that we're able to impact. But it's also, the kids that are out there that need them, or the agencies that really need those books. And it's just, when I talk to people and they're like, well, is there really that much need for books and programming? Yeah. And there really is. And that's something that not everyone's aware of, depending on who you interact with, or, if you're sort of out in the community or not. But there's a lot of need for good programming to get kids excited about reading. And, after you give the program for them to be able to pick out their own books and go home and, hopefully fill up their own bookcase.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So kind of on all of that, what's the biggest question or most frequent question you get about Madison Reading Project?
Anything from, how do you do it? We have other people who've contacted us who want to start something similar in a different city. So we've been able to help a couple other groups get started with, how do you even start something like this, whether it's sort of finding a good group of variety of people who are committed to your cause, anywhere down to how do you select which books stay and which books, don't stay in your giving collection, through how do you even, get people to donate, whether that's funds or donate books to you. So we get a variety of questions. And
so then kind of with our theme of marketing, how do you go about marketing the nonprofit?
That's something, I started with a zero budget, but social media was free.
Yeah, at the time.
At the time, it was free. And that's really, I got a website. It was sort of Facebook at the time is what I started with, and really used between social media, my website, and just started reaching out to people in my sort of contacts and then beyond that. So I definitely sort of made myself step out of my comfort zone and went to people I didn't really know and asked them, either to be a volunteer, to host a book drive, to participate in, an event or something like that. But I definitely put myself out there, and I think people, would reply back like, I don't know who you are, but this sounds really cool and I want to help. It's a good cause.
That's cool, and that word of mouth definitely builds and builds over time. So do you get any questions like, well, why wouldn't I just send the kids to the library? Or,
Sure.
Why wouldn't the internet be a good source versus the Madison Reading Project?
Right. We get questions, why don't they go to the library? There's definitely scenarios where kids aren't able to get to the library, whether it's not within walking distance or they don't have anyone to take them. There's, some people who are apprehensive about going to the library, unfortunately, because of whether it's an ID issue or just having a library card. And we're definitely proponents of going to the library and having your own books.
Yeah.
But there are kids who just unfortunately are not taken, or aren't able to get there.
Or especially if you're getting them in at a younger age and maybe their parents are working or whatever.
Yeah. People are working jobs, multiple jobs, so they're just not able to get to the library. And there is, and I also tell people, I'm like, think about probably all the books you have in your own home. And when we want a book, we probably go to a bookstore, go online, you order it, and you never think about it. Even if you think the price is kind of high, you think about it for a second and you hit click and you buy it. Mm-hmm. For a lot of kids that we're interacting with or agencies, they don't have those kinds of funds, and you're not going to pick a $12 or $20 book over a meal, or some supplies that you might need. So most people don't have those exciting books that they really want in their home or in their school. And if we are able to come to their school or to their if it's through a social worker or something like that, and say, here's all these awesome books and you can pick 3 or 4 today. They think it's like this is the most exciting thing that's happened to them. And it really is emotional sometimes for some kids because they never get to go shopping. Mm-hmm. So they might take half an hour to pick out books because they want to look at every single book. Yeah. And then they usually ask, like, can I have one for my sister? And I'm usually like,
Yeah.
of course you can have one for your sister. But it is something like, it's that big of a deal for them. I mean, they're so excited and they're emotional. Some kids are really emotional that's the book that I really wanted. I saw it in the Scholastic flyer and I knew that I would never get it. And if it's out there on the table, that they're able to take that and often say, like, write your name in it, take it home, read it, like the ownership and pride of that is huge, and that could be like a huge effect on their reading, for example, where they're like, I'm taking that book home, it's mine, I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it to my siblings and my parents and show it off, and that's what we want, is them to be, that inspired reading.
So you said something really quick I don't want people to miss, because everything you said there was just so impactful. But you said that they're deciding between a $12 or $20 book or a meal, and they're not going to choose it over a meal. So this is an avenue for them to get ownership in a book that they may not ever have access to.
Right. Yeah.
That's just tremendous.
It's books, right? And it's, sometimes we do programming as well. So sometimes it might be, hey, we're going to do a story time. It'll be a really fun book. You're going to do a literacy craft. Then you're going to do book shopping. And we try and get those kids like as jacked up on reading as possible. It's like grandma and grandpa with candy or whichever. So like that's all that, there's that excitement about it. But the shopping portion, I think, of it is something that, it gets me emotional, because I know I've seen those kids that are just that excited, and that's, they would never have that opportunity. And that's something I think most of us as adults, if you say, what was one of your favorite books growing up? We all have one. It doesn't even take you 2 seconds before you know which book it is. And we want to be able to provide that to those kids.
Yeah, no, I just say there's a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, business leaders in Madison that'll listen to this. And maybe I'm just saying it for myself, but I don't ever want to forget that we take for granted sometimes that I can go on Amazon, I can go to someone's direct website and buy a book, not even think about the cost, but then I get it as a write-off too if I'm buying it for any of my advisors. So there's all this stuff I don't even think about, but yet choosing a meal or choosing to buy a book, like,
right,
can't ever forget the impact that can have. So that's awesome. So how can our audience get involved with Madison Reading Project?
Definitely. I mean, there's a variety of different ways, whether it's an individual or a group or a team. So you can go to our website. We have a website.
Yeah, everything's online.
Go to our website. There's a variety of ways to get involved, whether you want to come and volunteer. There's a volunteer page. You can sign up to be on the list. There's different opportunities, whether you come to the center and help sort books, or if you want to be involved in some of the events that are out in the public, where you get to help, set up some of the books and talk to kids and their families. There's other events that we have, fundraisers. There's ways, you can sponsor an event or participate in just sort of general funds that go towards our operations. And then there's also a separate page with all different kinds of awesome books that are on our wish list so that people can donate those.
That's awesome.
And then the one other way that's always helpful too is for people to host a book drive. And that's sort of, again, we do have the guidelines of what kind of books we're looking for.
No adult books.
No adult books. So it has sort of,
rule number one.
Here's the books we would love to have. And here's some of the books, types of books we won't, don't like to take into the donation center. But there's a variety of ways to get involved.
That's good. Share your 50 Shades of Grey with your girlfriends. Don't give it to the Reading Project.
We sometimes have some good laughs at the center.
That's good. You got to be able to laugh as well.
Always.
That's right. So can I ask you something off topic?
Sure.
All right. Because I've just been really impressed with everything you're doing. Our conversation before, you're full-time at Iconica, basically full-time Reading Project, right? Mm-hmm. And all the time mom.
Yep.
And wife. So I know, I feel like there's a great amount of pressure on women being everything to everyone. And I'm raising 3 daughters. And I'm curious as to how you find balance and peace and grace with everything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely by the time I go to bed, I sleep really well.
I imagine.
But I think, too, sort of going through this process, of adding on running a nonprofit and all the, variety of needs and things I've had to learn along the way. It's just like running your own business. You've got, like our clients, and are we doing what we say we're going to be doing? Are we doing a good job at it? We've got volunteers, we've got employees, and how do you do that all? But at the same time, I think sort of being able to try and take a step back and knowing that you can't do everything. And that's definitely been my own learning process. And that's whether that's a nonprofit or it's your job, or, you're not going to be perfect. And also trying to make sure you create time, or whether that's, with an alarm clock saying, at this point I stop. And that's when I'm a mom, or when I'm going to bed, or I'm going to go have fun.
Yeah. You have fun too?
Yes, that's
Good.
really important to me. Most people who know me know that I think laughter and humor is extremely important.
Absolutely. So what's your go-to for fun?
Pretty much, I can put fun on anything. I could put a fun spin on anything.
Good.
But yeah, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I try and find the sort of silver lining, or if there's something that we're doing that's not fun, I'll make it fun.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
You sound like a great mom too. I think that was such an awesome advice. You weren't even giving advice. You were telling a story about you and your son, but it was really advice. Because it was like the fact that you found a way to get him to read in a manner that he wanted to, because he sounds a lot like me, being stubborn as a teenager.
Just
like it was just like, I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do, but if I want to do it, then I'll do it. So like just putting that spin on it, and you're cooking a great meal, you got that bonding time, and he's like, that's just a great way of giving people advice to like think about the situation differently. Mm-hmm. So I know you weren't even trying to give advice, but I hope people take that away from this conversation. So I know you probably have many, but what's your favorite book you're reading right now or have read recently?
Most recent book I read, it's called The Hate You Give, and it just came out.
The movie just came out.
Yeah. But I read it a couple of months ago, and it was a really good book. The movie's pretty close to the story, and it's set probably a year or two ago, but at this point it really could be in any current time. And it's definitely, it's a good sort of self-check on the current sort of political situation for a lot of different people in America.
That's interesting. No, that's really good. I was interested to see the movie. Unfortunately, I have the young kids, so I opted for Smallfoot, Bigfoot, or Bigfoot Small, whatever that Pixar or whatever movie just came out. Yeah. That's the last movie I saw.
Probably not for little kids, but worth taking kids over like age 10 or 12.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can our audience get in touch with you, whether it's personally or for the Madison Reading Project, marketing advice, whatever? How would you like them to reach out?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can always email me at my nonprofit, which is rowan@madisonreadingproject.com.
Well, awesome conversation today. Really enjoyed having you. Absolutely. Anytime. Well, I'm sure we'll have this conversation in a different manner again. Thanks for everybody listening today. We'll talk to you soon.